So today I got to actually squeeze in a little bit more than I had originally anticipated. Um, because I ended up having breakfast and getting to the Air and Space Museum and having to get a timed ticket, I did get to go to the Botanical Gardens, the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial, and then just kind of sat around and waited a little bit at the memorial before going into the Air and Space Museum. I am at the National Botanical Gardens. The Botanical Gardens are free. Now granted, right now it's springtime, so a lot of the outside stuff is not blooming, particularly the rose garden, but it is very, very peaceful here. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see my view. So this is the actual conservatory, the Botanical Gardens. The entrance is over on this side, but everything out here is part of the gardens. Now, once you get inside, the way that it's kind of set up is by different parts of the world, I guess you could say. So like there's a room for Hawaii, there is a room for tropics, one for the desert, and all of the various plants that you see in those climates. If you come here, just know that you are sort of walking into those climates. The desert area that had a lot of cacti was kind of dry and stifling. But then when you go into the tropics, they actually have the misters going and it's very humid. So if, let's say you have trouble breathing in those types of climates, might want to bypass that. But overall, it's really pretty. It's very peaceful. When I first got here, they had just let off like 2 busloads of school kids. And so I kind of rushed ahead to get in front of them. But there is plenty of room inside to walk around. Even though there was a lot of kids that had just got off the bus and went inside about the same time as me, I wasn't like backed up in a line or anything like that in there. They do have restrooms in there. They have water bottle refilling station. They also have a lot of seating. So as you're going along, there are benches outside here. I'm sitting at a table and chairs. So there's a lot of areas where if you wanted to just stop and enjoy the beauty around you, you could. They have sections that's very informational. So it talks about the different types of food that are grown in different parts of the world, and even what all goes into making certain foods and how much carbon dioxide gets put out because of making certain foods. Then they also have like medicinal plants, rare plants. It's very informational. Even if you're not thinking, okay, this is not something for me. If you're into plants, gardening, horticulture, or nature, this is a great place to visit. Now, if your time, a couple of tips for you for the Air and Space Museum. If your time is, for example, mine was 2 o'clock. At around 1:35, I went across the street to the museum and a line was already forming. This line wraps down the block and it's all of the people for the 2 o'clock time slot. So if you want to get into the museum right when the time is, whatever your time is, get there about 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes early. That way you can get to the front of the line. With that being said, it kind of doesn't matter. Once you get in there, it's not like they're timing you and you have a set amount of time to be in there. The way the layout is you have, when you walk in, you have the first floor, you do have a second floor, and then if you go downstairs, that's more of like a cafe, the store for the museum, restrooms, that sort of thing. So realistically, there's really only 2 floors of stuff. Most people will hit the first floor first because that's where they come out at. Now, you can go through the first floor and kind of wind your way through all of the different rooms and the exhibits and stuff, and then make your way up to the second floor, which is what I did. To me, I felt that was the easiest. On the first floor, there is a little exhibit where you can go through an old school plane and see how it was set up back in, I don't know, the 1950s or whenever it was. The line to do that can get a little long, 20, 30 people. If there is a line, don't worry, skip it, because you can come back to it. So with the timed entries at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, so forth and so on, everyone's hitting that first floor first, they're looking at that stuff, and then they make their way up to the second floor. Well, if you give it a little bit of time, everybody's up on the second floor, you can go through that on the first floor, that exhibit, with no wait. Same thing goes on the second floor. There is another plane that you can go into. And so if you head up to the second floor first, then you're more likely to not have as long of a wait, and you can go in to that one. On the second floor is the planetarium. And at the planetarium, they have 2 shows. I'm sure they probably change it out from time to time. Right now, there is one, I'm having to look at my tickets. There's one called Worlds Beyond Earth and one called Dark Universe. You can get your tickets. For the adults, one of the tickets was $9, the Worlds Beyond Earth, and for the Dark Universe, that was $6. Not quite sure why there's 2 different prices, but for a single adult, you're looking at $15 for the tickets. Each show lasts about 25 minutes, 25 minutes, because they have to have time to change out the auditorium for the next show. I would say it's probably about 25 minutes for the actual shows. So you could easily spend an hour just in the planetarium. Couple of things, couple of tips or thoughts before doing the shows. Number 1, when you get there, you want to buy your ticket pretty fast, and you want to be one of the first people into the auditorium. Most people, I noticed when they walked in, were just kind of like, you know, the seating doesn't matter. And it was very scattered across the auditorium. However, the girl selling the ticket said that the best seats are at the back. And so when I heard her say that, I was actually one of the last people to go in. In fact, the show had already started, but I managed to snag a free seat on the back row, and I can see why. It is a dome, and so the whole time you're having to look up. If you're on the first row, your neck's gonna be killing you. So you want to try and get there early and sit on the back row. Second little tip for this is if you have issues with vertigo or being dizzy, anything that can kind of give you motion sickness, these shows might not be the best thing for you. I really don't deal with that too much. Every once in a while, something will kind of throw me off and make me a little dizzy. But in the show, there were a few scenes that I was like, oh, kind of made your stomach turn a little because of the way that the show is set up. So if you have any kind of issues with dizziness, inner ear problems, anything that can possibly give you, nausea, might not want to do the shows. But they are kid-friendly shows, so if you do have kids, the prices are cheaper. I'm not sure because I don't have a kid. The prices are cheaper for the tickets for children, but I do recommend the shows. They were very informative and just kind of cool. It was almost kind of like 3D, but not really. So yeah. Another tip for the museum is save the museum store for last. There are some hands-on exhibits where you get to push buttons and twist knobs and do all kinds of stuff. And you really don't want to do that with a lot of souvenirs in your hand. There is the museum store on the first floor. And then you see on the map, it's also on the ground floor or underneath. If you go into the museum on the first floor, you have the first floor museum, you actually have a mezzanine in the same store, and you have an escalator that goes down to the ground floor part of the museum. And so the museum store is huge. Don't just think it's just the one room. What I noticed is the items for sale on the mezzanine level were a little more adult, high-end things. So like cufflinks, ties, jewelry, that sort of thing. More adult books, like novels. Now they do have kids' books, but those are more on the ground floor. But I made it through the museum in about 2 hours. That's including my hour at the planetarium. Again, I'm just not a person to sit and read everything at a museum. I was able to take tons of pictures and check out some really cool stuff, but yeah, I'm just not one to read every single exhibit. From there, I went to the American Indian Museum. I had passed by it several times and thought that would be interesting to go to. The building is huge. It's like 4 stories. However, there wasn't that much in there, like at all. I was kind of disappointed in that one. The actual store in the museum where you can buy souvenirs is huge, but it's not your typical souvenirs that you will see at the other Smithsonian museums. They don't have a lot of little kitschy things, like magnets and stuff like that. You're not really gonna find a whole lot of shot glasses. It is more of like Native American pottery, artwork, jewelry. There was a huge case for just fine jewelry. But for the actual museum itself, there really wasn't anything on the first floor. That was more of a cafe and the store. Second store, or second floor, I believe it also had a little eating area and then a little small display area. The majority of the exhibits are on the 3rd and 4th floor, but even that, it's not a whole lot. I would say it's probably not overly kid-friendly. There are a lot of exhibits in there that you do have to do a lot of reading. So I would think that if kids went in there, they might get a little bored. Now they did have an area off to the side that was like a kids area, but it was actually closed. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why. I think I saw a sign, something about it being closed on Mondays, but today's not a Monday, so not quite sure why the kids area was closed. Now, I will say I got there around 4 o'clock, and I think the museum maybe closes at 5. Maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, so it's not the most kid-friendly. Kids are going to really enjoy the Natural History Museum and the Air and Space Museum, but not so much the American Indian Museum. From there, I got back onto the circulator bus, went back to the hotel, dropped off the souvenirs that I did buy at the Air and Space Museum, and then I went and got some dinner. I got fast food Japanese hibachi. It's a quick way Japanese hibachi. It was really good, inexpensive. I think it was like $16 for a ton of food. So yeah, I recommend that. I am back at my room. I am going to get ready for bed, even though it is, let me see here, it's only 6:30. So I am going to get ready for bed and go to sleep early tonight. Tomorrow I have the FBI tour at 9 o'clock. So I want to get there really early, or 8:30 or 9. It's early. It's an early tour. So I want to get there in enough time to make it through security and get some breakfast before I go. I think, I could be wrong, but I think the tour might be 4 hours. We'll see. So I want to make sure I eat breakfast before I go and then get there in enough time and get through security. After that, I don't think I have anything planned. I'm having to look at my agenda on my phone. I'm having to constantly check my agenda on my phone to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so after the FBI tour is at 9 a.m., but they recommend that you get there no later than 8:30 for the security. I don't have anything planned until 4 o'clock. I have a tour of the Library of Congress, which everyone I've talked to has been like, you have to see it. It's just beautiful. So I'm really excited to find out if it's going to live up to the extremely elevated hype that everybody has been telling me about. Hopefully between the FBI tour and the Library of Congress tour, I can possibly see a couple more museums in the area. I'll just have to look at the map and kind of plan it out. Today I did rest as much as possible. The planetarium, that was an hour of not walking. And then anytime I was able to sit down and elevate my leg, I did. That way my foot's not going to be hurting too bad. But right now I am looking at my foot and my shoe and comparing it to my other foot and shoe, and I don't know if I'm even going to be able to get my shoe off of my foot because it's so swollen. When I got back from eating dinner, I stopped in at the front desk and asked if they had some more of the bucket liner, the ice bucket liner bags, and she gave me several of those. So I am going to make another ice pack for my ankle and elevate it again and sleep with it elevated with the ice on it to try and get the swelling down so I can make it through tomorrow. Today the pain was not even remotely close as the last 2 days, so it's slowly getting better, but I still need to watch it because one little thing and I'm done for the rest of this trip. But yeah, so I'm gonna call it a night. I will see everyone tomorrow. Bye.